Just like vitamin B12 deficiency has affected a lot of people, and most times it goes unnoticed. People will experience symptoms in relation to anemia, which is tiredness, lightheadedness, fatigue, even after sleeping for 6 to 8 hours, as we mentioned. People will experience issues like the tongue, having these ridges and the geographic tongue. People will have these tingling effects in their feet and their hands, sometimes cold feet, all right? But they will not associate that to any of this, because most times when you're diagnosed with this, people are rushing to test the blood sugars and all that, and then they put you on medication. But nobody's taking a chance on vitamin D and vitamin B12, because their deficiency symptoms happen to come in hand, and most probably because of the influx of processed foods, food products, to be honest, which don't have any vitamins and any nutrition. People are suffering from vitamin deficiencies, and that's how companies that are selling new supplements are reaping big, because they understand, and possibly they are the same companies to the food industry. So they understand that, of course, the more you consume these inflammatory foods and the more you consume these products that are coming from industries, you will end up having vitamin deficiencies, and therefore they'll come in with the supplements for this. And vitamin B12 has actually been taken advantage of, and there are a lot of supplements for vitamin B12, including injections. But I'll talk about that now. This video is intended to talk about vitamin B12 deficiency. So most of us will have a lot of these symptoms: fatigue and lightheadedness. And these symptoms, before I even mention the symptoms, you'll realize that these symptoms are actually associated with the functions of vitamin B12. So vitamin B12 plays a very important function in DNA synthesis. Imagine that. It plays a role. So therefore, mental health issues can actually come in because of deficiency in DNA and the mutations that are coming in with the defective DNA because of the deficiency of vitamin B12. Also, central nervous system functioning relies on vitamin B12. Therefore, mental health issues are also coming in handy here. And then low energies, and of course, it plays a role in energy synthesis and red blood cell synthesis. So once you understand these four, you will know that when you're having fatigue and lightheadedness, of course, that is anemia because of vitamin B12 deficiency. Therefore, you are unable to produce enough red blood cells to ferry oxygen to the tissues. And then you end up having these problems. You can even faint. Number two, glossitis, an inflammation of the tongue, and sometimes stomatitis, where you have this inflamed buccal cavity, the mouth, and the mucosa on the mouth is inflamed, and you have some wounds in your mouth. And also dry mouth. There are people who their lips are constantly peeling off and they're dry, and they are not on any medication for chemo or the steroid drugs. So they now understand their tongue is actually coming in as a result of vitamin B12 deficiency. Paresthesia, this basically meaning the tingling effect. You feel like somebody's pricking your feet or your fingers with a needle. And this can actually be confused with the peripheral neuropathy that happens in people who have been diagnosed with diabetes. Now, diabetes destroys the nerves, and when you destroy the nerves, you end up having the tingling effects and the numbness in your fingers and in your legs. Sometimes you can get these cold feet, or sometimes they are very hot and you're struggling to actually cool them down. All right. So that is paresthesia. So two things in people who have diabetes: check vitamin B12 levels. You might be deficient. And the reason why you're deficient as a diabetic patient, you're deficient in vitamin B12, is because if you are on a drug called metformin, which is a standard drug for pre-diabetes and diabetes, a first-line medication, it actually blocks the absorption of vitamin B12. Therefore, most people who have diabetes, their peripheral neuropathy can actually be exacerbated, or it can actually be increased when they have vitamin B12 deficiency. So you can imagine that tragedy. You're taking metformin, you end up having vitamin B12 deficiency, which will cause you the paresthesia, the tingling effect or the numbness. And also, you are diabetic, and therefore this diabetes is causing you peripheral neuropathy. So it's double tragedy for people who have diabetes. And then depression, of course, you understand, okay, the paresthesia is coming in as a result of the central nervous system problems. And then the depression, again, central nervous system problems. All right. So depression, easily irritable. They are so angry every single time. And a slight thing can actually upset them so badly. Sluggishness in the morning, there's this mental fogging, and they are so slow to make decisions. That can be vitamin B12 deficiency. And then balance problem. If you don't have an ear problem, then now check vitamin B12 deficiency. Okay. So these are basically the symptoms of vitamin B12. Now understand this, that they are the sources of vitamin B12 are basically the animal products. If you're somebody who uses the animal fats to cook your meals, if you're somebody who consumes red meat and white meat in plenty and you make them fatty, if you're somebody who consumes eggs, the organ meats, all these are rich in vitamin B12. Therefore, getting a deficiency of vitamin B12 is really, I think it should be rare, because if you're consuming healthy foods, there are chances you will not have these problems. But I'll mention something, because there are people who still consume healthy foods, but they still have vitamin B12 deficiency. So I'll mention something when I'll go to this diagram, okay? And then, of course, those people who are vegans, this channel does not encourage you to eat vegetables only. This channel is a channel that encourages you to eat foods, right? Meats, animal proteins, vegetables, and avocados. The avocados as the fruits. So for vegans, most of them, if not all, let's just say most of them, they require vitamin B12 injections as a supplement to their deficiency of vitamin B12, because this vitamin B12 is actually coming in from animal products. So if you don't eat animal products, you expect challenges in terms of vitamin B12. Now, on depression, I want to explain something. There's a compound in our system that will constantly destroy your central nervous system, your nerves, and even the DNA. And this compound is called homocysteine. All right. So when you have low vitamin B12, you constantly produce homocysteine, which is so dangerous to your DNA and so dangerous to your central nervous system. That's why you start experiencing dementia, loss of memory, psychosis, and depression. So all these central nervous issues, including irritability, are coming in as a result of increase in homocysteine as a result of decrease in vitamin B12. Once you've understood this, let me take you to this diagram that is going to explain to you something new. Now, we've said that vitamin B12 is coming in through the diet, right? However, there is something that is called the intrinsic factor. In the stomach, remember, on the stomach wall, you have what? You have cells. These cells are called parietal cells. The parietal cells have different functions, but among the functions, the two functions that are well known is production of hydrochloric acid. Remember, hydrochloric acid, when it comes into the stomach, this means you are able to digest the animal proteins that you've actually consumed, because you need a strong acid in the stomach to liberate or to tear down these larger molecules of protein to release the vitamin B12, release the iron for absorption. So if your stomach acid is weak because you're taking drugs like antacids and all that, it means you're going to suffer vitamin B12 deficiency. So this acid comes in to help you digest the protein that you're eating that is going to give you vitamin B12. Okay, so you liberate vitamin B12, and now that vitamin B12, the same parietal cells produce something called the intrinsic factor. This intrinsic factor is here now. We have pumped it into the stomach. Now this intrinsic factor is going to bind to vitamin B12, and this is the reason why it will now cross the barrier into the bloodstream. So vitamin B12 cannot cross the stomach barrier into the bloodstream without the intrinsic factor. This means if you have chronic gastritis, you're destroying the parietal cells. When you destroy the parietal cells, we expect you to have low intrinsic factor. When you have low intrinsic factor, it means you will have vitamin B12 deficiency because you cannot absorb it, even though you're eating the red meats. So let's say somebody who eats meat plus wheat, let's say you eat chapati and beef, and the beef is cooked in seed oils. You've wasted that beef and the vitamin B12. Why? Because the seed oils are highly inflammatory to the gut wall. The wheat is highly inflammatory to the gut wall. Therefore, we are destroying the parietal cells, and therefore intrinsic factor will not be produced enough to bind the vitamin B12 so that it's aided in absorption. And when it goes into the bloodstream, it's now carried all the way to the brain or the CNS and to the bone marrow to actually be used to synthesize the red blood cells. So therefore, if you are unable to synthesize red blood cells, you're going into anemia. Okay? When you get into anemia, therefore you're going to be fatigue, tiredness, and sluggishness. That is explaining the RBC function of vitamin B12. You see that? So yes, you can be eating a very rich diet in vitamin B12, but you're actually combining that diet with a lot of inflammatory foods that are actually causing a lot of problems here. And therefore, you don't have enough intrinsic factor to help you absorb the vitamin B12. Okay? Now, actually most people, those same inflammatory foods expose your stomach content to the immune system, causing autoimmune conditions. When you have autoimmune conditions, this autoimmune can actually target the parietal cells to destroy them. And that will reduce the intrinsic factor. So anything that reduces the intrinsic factor can actually lead you to the deficiency of vitamin B12. And the things that reduce cause inflammation or destroy the parietal cells, of course, we've talked about autoimmune, we've talked about medication like NSAIDs, we've talked about the PPIs and drugs like antacids in ulcers, we've talked about dehydration, because the first role of the first treatment for somebody who has chronic gastritis is hydration with salt and water. That's the first intention. You have to hydrate them so that you actually thicken the stomach wall and help them heal from gastritis. Chemotherapeutic drugs, drugs for cancer problems, antibiotics, constant use of antibiotics, problems with this wall. The steroid drugs that are used in chronic inflammation, arthritis, and asthma, they're going to cause you a lot of problems in terms of intrinsic factors. So all this can actually expose you to vitamin B12 deficiency. And you see, these are the things that most of us can actually, you can easily outlook them as a doctor. You will not pay attention to this, all right? Also remember this, people who go for weight loss procedures in terms of the gastric bypass and all that, the bariatric surgeries and procedures, they end up reducing your stomach wall. That is already reducing the amount of the number of parietal cells that are helping you to produce intrinsic factor. So you expect anemia to come as a result of that. And that's why people who have gone for gastric bypass, they will always come back with the need of getting either vitamin B complex injections or vitamin B12 supplements. Right? Now you see the reason why. So therefore, you can lose weight naturally without having to go for those surgeries. You spend a lot of money to go for that surgery when you can easily change your discipline, and then now you lose weight easily. So these are the things that actually cause you problems with the inflammation of the stomach wall and reduce parietal cells, and therefore reduce intrinsic factor, and therefore lead you to vitamin B12 malabsorption, right? Which leads to vitamin B12 deficiency, and therefore the symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency are coming in handy. So once you fix your kitchen, once you fix your gut, you're so good to go. You will not have to need a supplement for this. And I constantly tell you that the only reason why you are taking a supplement is because you're eating products from the industries. If you concentrate on eating foods, if you reduce exposure to antibiotics and medication, if you lose that weight in the right way, you will not need any supplement, because food, there's no supplement that is not in foods. All right? If you're a vegan advocate, this is the time for you to actually start thinking twice. All right? Unless you want to be constantly taking vitamin B12 shots. So this is vitamin B12 deficiency and things that you should know about this deficiency condition.